I appreciate it.
All right, let's get into it. Christian McCaffrey, thinking man's number one pick in the draft. There's obviously reams and reams of data and stats that back this up, but why don't you hit some of the higher points for us real quick that featured in the guide?
I feel like a lot of people are getting cute with this too. Like, oh, it should be Bijan or Breece because they're younger and McCaffrey due for a breakdown. And I know we just had the calf strain in camp. It's nothing. They're resting him. They know he's going to be their workhorse for the season. So I think it is just so cute. You don't have a guy right now who's been the running back 3, running back 1, running back 1, running back 8, running back 2, and running back 1 across his last 6 seasons. 2019, 5th highest scoring running back of all time. And then the next year in 2020 was on pace to do even better before he got hurt. And then he joins the 49ers. And it has just been, as you can see, if you're watching on the YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, the graph we have up here just shows how dominant he has been since joining the 49ers. He has 20 half PPR points in 15 of 26 games, over 20. That's over half his games, 57.6%. He's been top 12, a running back 1, 77% of his games as a 49er. And he's been top 5, an absolute week winner, 54% of the time in 14 of 26 games. It's crazy. It truly does not get more consistent. You don't have a higher floor, a higher ceiling. He's never going to lose you a week. He very regularly will win you weeks, and it's at the scarcest position. As we get into these redraft strategies, I understand we're going to talk about 2 more guys we think belong in that first pick conversation, and they're not running backs. There are some just elite wide receivers, but it is so hard to find these bona fide workhorses. And when you get in redraft, you'll see how these receivers, I mean, around 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the guy that I outlined it, there's this wide receiver oasis, and the running backs, there's just maybe 5, 6 of the guys that truly are quote unquote hero worthy. McCaffrey's the picture of that. You know exactly what you're getting rather than speculate, oh, this younger guy might be the next McCaffrey. Just take McCaffrey, number 1 overall. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's got to be CMC.
It's got to be CMC. Agree with you. Obviously, my favorite part about this, and it just pops in the graphic pretty well. My favorite part about this graph that you're showing here is that we're talking about a year and a half worth of stats. Once he was an RB3. One time.
One time. And I think he might have it was right before their playoff run, and he had he took a hard hit, and the coach was just kind of like, no, we're not going to risk you. We're just going to kind of pull you out here. Like, let's get our feet under us here. You know,
one time. And 5 times he was an RB2, and that's it. And then other than that, he was off the chart. And that you cannot, if you're looking for consistency and just massive upside, which is obviously what you want to do with the number 1 pick, to me, clear winner. But let's talk about some of the guys that, you said people are trying to get cute. People are talking about other guys. This is certainly one of the other guys. CeeDee Lamb, who you've got at number 2. Don't want to get cute and go number 1, but still a pretty awesome grab if you can get him.
Yeah, and honestly, in full PPR leagues and certainly in best ball where it's a more wide receiver heavy market, if you want to go CeeDee Lamb, that's actually not getting too cute in my opinion. I think this guy is unbelievable, and people know that. He's a clear number 1. You look at this graph on the left here, all the things he ranked first in targets, first in receptions, first in total touchdowns, first in PPR fantasy points, first in half PPR fantasy points, second in yards. The guy was an absolute animal, but I think people might not realize just how terrifying that his season was, because in the first half of the season, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, they came out slow. They were Brian Schottenheimer, run-heavy attack. It was gross. Dak was getting dropped in leagues. If I'm not mistaken, did you pick him up in a league? It was crazy. Dak was on waiver wires, was how bad this passing game was. He was the quarterback 22, 14.5 PPR points at that point. Offense was 20th in passing yards, bottom 5 in pass rate over expectation. And CeeDee Lamb, for the first 6 weeks, just the wide receiver 13 in fantasy. If you don't remember, one of my worst calls last year was CeeDee Lamb was one of the riskier first-round picks, and that exactly what I was worried about was happening. Wide receiver 13, not really a first-rounder. I was like, okay, maybe my call was good. And then what happened after the bye was just absurd. This guy goes bananas. They completely changed their philosophy, became the most pass-happy attack other than the Chiefs for the second half of the year. The Cowboys end up, despite that slow start, finishing number 1 in points, pass yards, pass attempts, passing touchdowns per game. And of course, CeeDee Lamb was the key cog of that, an absolute fantasy god. So that graph that you see on the right, and if you're listening to the podcast, weeks 8 to 17, this high-flying attack, CeeDee Lamb averaged, it's absurd. All those games were, only 3 games were wide receiver 2. And wide receiver is a lot harder to finish in the top 12 than running back, given that. He averaged 28.9 PPR points per game from week 8 to week 18. If you look historically, Cooper Kupp's legendary season, like the best season of all time, 491 points was CeeDee Lamb's pace. That would have been 52 more points than that Cooper Kupp insane 2021. Like, that's how good he was down the stretch, just going completely bonkers. Now, the risk right now is he holding out? Is he not going to show up? I mean, if you saw yesterday, Jerry Jones said we have no urgency with this, and then CeeDee Lamb retweeted him and said LOL on it. So I have no idea what's going to happen, but just that upside, if they do keep their pedal to the metal all year, like they did in that second half, and why wouldn't you? You have Zeke Elliott in backfield, a corpse at this point. I don't understand what they're doing, why they're playing hardball with this guy, but assuming that he's there, the only other weapon there is like Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson. It's clear, like CeeDee Lamb is that number one dude. He was on pace again, 215 targets, 156 catches, 1,969 yards, and 17 touchdowns was that second half pace. And honestly, I could see that being the season he puts up as long as he's there, given the lack of competition, given the explosive offense. So yeah, CeeDee Lamb, I think it's CMC is the clear number one, but in full PPR, or if you want to test out zero running back, you're worried about the calf strain, then go to CeeDee Lamb because he is just a phenomenal pick.
I mean, it really was just unbelievable how night and day his first and second half of his seasons were. Because, like you said, you were a little low on him, or at least a little hesitant on him at the beginning, and you looked completely right for like almost half a season. And then he just blew up in a way that I cannot imagine anybody saw coming. You're right. I did pick up Prescott off waivers for like nothing, and it ended up being like a real, like, serious asset. No question about it. As far as him holding out, Jerry Jones has been doing stuff like this since I was a kid. He tried to push around Emmitt Smith, I remember one year, and then they started 0-2 and he caved like a cheap folding chair. So I think the urgency to get CeeDee Lamb back on the field, I see it, you see it. I have to imagine he's going to see it eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later as well. I expect to see CeeDee Lamb on the field.
Absolutely.
Oh, I've been eating free off in the Northeast off this guy for how long have we been doing this? 8 years?
Yeah, it's crazy.
We have been doing this a long time now. And Tyreek Hill,
at least 7, probably 8. You're right. It's nuts to even think about it. Just like I don't even put it in perspective. Oh my god!
This is the 9th year I've lived out here, just the very beginning. So I've been here 8 full years, and we've been doing this the whole time I've lived.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it is 8 years, and Tyreek Hill was one of our early triumphs, you'd have to say. And man, he has aged pretty well, at least as a football player, which is all we care about.
I know and nobody's been higher on him than you. I remember that one year, the controversial take, you had him above Odell Beckham. I think it was Hill's second season. It was Beckham's first season in Cleveland. And I was like, you're nuts. And all the YouTube comments, get this guy off the air. He's an idiot.
Yeah. That was
Why does he have a microphone?
Mitch Renz called him a gadget player.
Yeah. Oh, we put him to shame. That was rough. That was tough. Yeah,
he's beyond a gadget player. This guy is a bona fide amazing. Gosh, he's incredible. But go on.
Oh, he's so damn good. And I think, again, similar to CeeDee Lamb, like his final stats, everybody knows he was the wide receiver 2. He actually led the NFL. The one thing that CeeDee Lamb did not lead in was yards. That was Tyreek Hill who took that over. So everybody knows he had a good season. But it's another one of those ones where there's a couple little blips in the radar that had everything gone perfectly smooth, we'd be talking about the first 2,000-yard wide receiver in history. He was on pace for that through his first 12 games of the season. Yeah. He then suffered an ankle injury that he ended up gutting it out through, still playing quite well. But you look at his first 12 games, 26.3 PPR points per game. He was on pace for 2,098 yards, 17 touchdowns, 132 catches. Again, like, this is why, yes, I know going anyone other than CMC I said was cute. As more so at running back, though. If you wanted to go one of these two receivers over him, like, these are just godly seasons that you rarely see, and they feel very replaceable because not even replaceable. Like they feel like replicable is what I wanted to say for it. Like you could copy this again for Tyreek Hill. You could copy it again for CeeDee Lamb. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Tyreek Hill went for 2,000 yards. Mike McDaniels is just so good at using this guy in space, getting him the ball and letting him just rip through the defenses. It's so crazy that to leave Patrick Mahomes, you'd think like there's no way he could somehow get better, but they just use him as such a centerpiece of this offense. And I know Tua is not better than Pat Mahomes at all, but it's more so the layup targets, the run after the catch opportunities. Yes, he was getting those in KC too, but they just scheme him to a whole different level there with Mike McDaniels. And I just see no reason for this guy to drop off this year. Waddle's looking good in camp, and he'll be back. But it's always been clear number one, Tyreek, clear number two, Jalen Waddle. So again, he's always set his goal at 2,000 yards. He could have hit it had he not had that little ankle tweak. I think, he's going to, again, he's already talked about, I want that 2,000 yards. I want to be the first person to do it. Clearly, he could do it, and I would absolutely not be surprised at all. So to wrap up that conversation again, like who should be your number one pick? Yes, I think it's CeeDee Lamb CMC because of the positional scarcity at running back. Oh, but man, like Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, the legendary seasons they just had, the way that those could easily be recreated in 2024, if not even bested by these two, they definitely warrant first overall pick consideration, and certainly in PPR leagues. So definitely check those three guys out. Other than that, though, I think you're getting cute, and there are people ranking running backs ahead of CMC and stuff. But these three, if you took any of them, I would not argue with you.
I kind of feel like with both Lamb and Hill, maybe a better chance than CMC that they exceed like what the amazing things that they did last year. You know what I mean? CMC, again, injury is the big factor here. If these guys are healthy for 17 games or whatever in these systems, they're all going to put up just massive numbers. It's tough to predict injury, obviously. But, if you told me that Tyreek was going to get the 2,000 this year, I wouldn't be shocked. I really wouldn't. I mean, if CD puts up anything like what he did last season over like a longer stretch than like 9 games or whatever, he's going to win like every league, somebody who's got him. Those three, obviously, they're the top three. Talk about, you mentioned Tua not as good as Pat Mahomes. Of course not. But talk about a situation where both guys just landed on their feet. I mean, Tyreek goes somewhere and you're just like, well, he's not with Pat Mahomes anymore. Okay. And then he just puts up some of the best seasons a wide receivers ever put up. And Mahomes, ho-hum, just wins another Super Bowl. So
it's crazy. It makes no sense why they were better without each other, but yet they were. I do think that was a great point that you brought up too, just before we wrap up these last three guys. And again, we're talking about the best of the best. How much can you harp on them? But it is a big decision when you're chasing through those top three picks. Who is the best guy? I have him that ranked that way, but we wanted to outline the case for all three. I think the CMC point is a good one, though, that like they talked about lessening his load. He already had the calf strain. We know there's a little bit of an injury history there. He hasn't missed a game in God knows how long, a few seasons now. But there is a chance that, maybe they scale him back, get him ready for the playoffs a little bit more. Like we saw that Travis Kelce kind of treatment last year. Whereas the other two, it's just like, they're going to get maybe 200 targets. They could potentially even go up. There is a chance that they exceed what they did last year, where I do think it's tricky to picture that world for CMC getting better than what he's already done with the 49ers, given how they want to lessen his load. So, if he does better, I think he'll probably maintain what he did. Again, that's why he's number one. But, I think you make a really good point that if somebody was to go downward based on what they did, the most likely probably is CMC too. So
those three,
it's something to consider, but I still keep him at the top because running backs are just so hard to find, especially one that's
agreed. Agreed.
What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.